Today's podcast is brought to you by AlleyRepair.com. Don't leave your skee ball machines lying around collecting dust in the basement. Let AlleyRepair.com bring those machines back to life. High quality workmanship for your skee ball playing needs. Contact AlleyRepair.com today. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Fro Life Wrestling Podcast. In this episode, we're going to discuss all kinds of happenings around the world of professional wrestling, starting with this day in pro wrestling history. And I haven't done a whole lot of this in the past, but today's a big day for me because I can remember as a child certain things that happened that will forever be stuck in my head. And one of them, today, for those who aren't looking at the calendar, February 5th, back in 1988, saw Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant do battle on WWF Main Event. That night, they actually got 33 million viewers to tune into network television to watch Hogan and Andre battle for the first time one-on-one since WrestleMania 3. And this was the controversial match where Earl and Dave Hebner both were involved, and it ended up Hogan losing the WWF Championship to Andre the Giant, only to see him, quote-unquote, surrender the title to the Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase moments later, which essentially ended Andre's World Championship reign after only a few seconds, and vacated the title, which would lead to the championship tournament at WrestleMania 4 that would eventually be won by Randy Macho Man Savage. But that show was incredibly influential and very important in the evolution of the WWF back then, because at that time, Hulk Hogan was the only established real main event level star, and this gave an opportunity to develop the Macho Man's character into that next big star, to make him believable that he was every bit as good as Hulk Hogan, and to create some of those matches that were higher performer quality than the ones Hogan would put on. No offense to Hulk Hogan, he was a star and he was the big draw. But at the other end of the story is that you're up against the National Wrestling Alliance, who at the time had Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, people like that going head to head with you, and they would put on a better wrestling show. It may not have been as great a production quality or as great in the entertainment end of things, but when it came down to straight up wrestling, they had a superior product. So by transitioning the championship from Hogan to Andre, and then from Andre, we thought, to Ted DiBiase at the time, only to have Jack Tunney step in and strip the championship and make it vacant. For that to happen really gave the opportunity for someone other than Hulk Hogan to run with the title, which would be the Macho Man Randy Savage. So this day in history, very important one. Other things that have happened, February 5th, the night the line was crossed, for any of those people who are diehard ECW fans in Philadelphia and around the country, February 5th, 1994 was the night that we saw the first three-way dance between Sabu, Shane Douglas, and Terry Funk, where they went the time limit, and the respect and the adulation from the crowd was just overwhelming. For anyone who's never seen the match, I highly encourage you to check it out. Go to YouTube, pull it up. It is one of those really franchise-making moments for ECW, where they did something that hadn't been done before, and it went over really well. And that was the day that I think that the ECW revolution really kicked off, because fans realized that real wrestling, the kind of wrestling that old school fans and even some of the newer fans came to appreciate by watching ECW products. So it's very cool that too was a February 5th historical moment. And one other, February 5th, 2002. There are several, but this one, I have to mention it because I found it to be so shocking when it happened, is when Maven defeated The Undertaker to win the WWF Hardcore Championship, which I know in the grand scheme of things, the Hardcore title doesn't mean a whole lot, but to see them put so much emphasis into building this new character, Maven, who came out of Tough Enough as a winner, and only to see his career pretty much fizzle and crash and never do anything significant again after around 2005, it's really interesting how the rise and fall of someone like that, and pretty much all the original Tough Enough characters, really went down. The only one who really has any kind of contribution still to this day is Johnny Mundo, John Morrison. Otherwise, pretty much all the talents from the Tough Enough, the original Tough Enough era, are pretty much gone. So that's our little bit of historical retrospective. We're going to get on with the current news of the day, starting with Cage Side Seats with a report out about Ryback. They were questioning in an interview whether or not he would be interested in a potential appearance for TNA Wrestling, which Ryback immediately said he wasn't closed to, but made a real point to talk about his supplement line and other projects that he's working on currently outside of the wrestling business, and that he's really committed to those as a full-time thing, that he still does his spot shows here and there, but his focus is on his supplement line, which I can appreciate. I don't think, though, sometimes Ryback realizes how much WWE contributed to his ability to market his brand. the Feed Me More brand or whatever he wants to call it, that couldn't happen without the time in WWF or WWE. So it's interesting how he has so much animosity towards a company that, whether he liked the way he was booked or storylines or not, really provided him with the biggest part of his financial future and his financial freedom. He talked in his interview about being able to make as much or more money on the independent scene than he did in World Wrestling Entertainment. If that's true, it's because you weren't pushing enough merchandise, because you know that there's merchandise clauses built into all the contracts now. And at one point, his merchandise was selling very, very well, second only sometimes to John Cena. So for him to imply that he's making as much or more money, I highly doubt that he's making as much money as he did when he was having all the merchandise deals come in, when he was undefeated and being pushed to the main event. He also made reference in that conversation to being improperly pushed and never getting the main spotlight. But I question that statement when you had moments against John Cena and The Shield and CM Punk headlining pay-per-views. That is that main event spot. And maybe he didn't get the win, but if you believe things like Michael Hayes and the Road Dogg and people like that, wins and losses don't matter anyway. So whether you won those spots or not, you were still in that main event picture. So that should be something he reflects on, and he should, in my opinion, be a little more gracious towards WWE. And if TNA were to offer him an opportunity, I think he'd be foolish not to accept it, so he could further the brand that he's trying to push so hard. Other news, WrestlingInc.com reporting that Sabu had some comments about WWE's Hall of Fame and a variety of other topics. They had a conversation about Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman, their similarities and differences, talking about how they're both evil geniuses pretty much, but that they do it in a very different way, that his mentality of his character and where he was going with violence wasn't along the same lines as that of Paul Heyman, and that Vince McMahon had a very different approach to the same kind of mentality. And it was pretty cool. It was very respectful of Vince McMahon, the way he spoke. At the same time, later in the interview, he talked about their Hall of Fame being a fake Hall of Fame and how he would only accept entrance to that Hall of Fame if he really needed the money. I find that interesting, considering his uncle, the Sheik, was put in, and he and Rob Van Dam gave a special shout out to him when that happened and made it such a big deal that his uncle was put in. And now he's trashing the same Hall of Fame that his inspiration is a part of. I know there's a lot of people who are critical of WWE for not having a physical Hall of Fame, and I know that's something they've worked on various times, and I hope they put together at some point. But at the end of the day, a real Hall of Fame, I've heard critics say, oh, it's just WWE wrestlers. I don't remember Abdullah the Butcher being a WWE wrestler, but he's in the Hall of Fame. Same thing with many other talents. Nick Bockwinkel wasn't a WWE mainstay. He was an AWA guy, but he still found a way to get into the Hall of Fame. People like that. Vern Gagne obviously wasn't a WWE guy. He had a couple matches where he went in. I was just watching one the other day of him on YouTube. That's one of those things I like to do, is pull out all these old videos on YouTube, and I watched one where he was wrestling in Madison Square Garden, but against Nikolai Volkov. So if anybody wants to check that out, go for it. It's actually a pretty cool match. But it's interesting to see the strange way that some of the talents view the Hall of Fame as being completely illegitimate, when in reality, it is relatively inclusive. I'm not saying that there aren't several talents who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame prior to some of them that have already gotten in, but there is some of the political negotiating that goes on in those decisions. And at the end of the day, they have a Hall of Fame that is more legitimate than any of the others, except potentially there is a Hall of Fame that is voted on every year by a huge conglomerate of wrestling writers and journalists and things like that, very similar to what you do in some other sports. But the reality is, those people are looking at it from a purist perspective, and Vince is kind of like the mastermind of the whole wrestling entertainment, the sports entertainment movement, and his approach to the Hall of Fame is very different. I think he appreciates talent that does things that the other Hall of Fame does not, and that's, I think, a big part of why The Godfather got in last year. He wasn't the best wrestler in the world, and I don't know that he would ever make it into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame that people sometimes refer to outside of WWE. But at the end of the day, he was a phenomenal performer. And I think that's what the WWE Hall of Fame is all about. It's not just your wrestling talent, but what you contribute to the sport in all aspects, including your interviews, your promos, your entertainment value, all the peripheral stuff you do around the ring. So interesting to see that Sabu isn't as receptive to that as he was when his uncle was being brought into that. Cody Rhodes had an interview up. I saw this one on WrestleZone.com talking about whether or not he misses WrestleMania season. And interesting to see that he claims that he wants nothing to do with it, even though many of the wrestling population are going to flock to Orlando and Miami and places like that near WrestleMania during WrestleMania weekend, that he doesn't want to do that. He wants to stay away, and talking about how 10 years in any one place, it's not the same anymore and all that. I get that. But if you don't have a sincere appreciation for WrestleMania, and I don't care what your personal issues are with WWE, just being around the fans during that event should be a huge thing for all talents. And for him not to want to be a part of that, somewhat frustrating. And I think he's being somewhat disingenuous towards World Wrestling Entertainment, again, almost like Ryback, and forgetting what all they've done for his character. Do you really think that New Japan Pro Wrestling, Ring of Honor, TNA, all these companies, and these, even Global Force Wrestling, like, would they really want to bring this guy in and feature him and give him championships and thus around the world if he didn't have the run with WWE? He's only able to do what he's doing now because of WWE. Prior to them, he was just an amateur wrestler in high school who happened to be the son of Virgil Runnels, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. But at the end of the day, he's now a mainstream character purely because of his experience in World Wrestling Entertainment. And it would be nice to see him want to at least give back to the fans who supported him for so long. On the topic of the Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Express have been rumored to potentially be entering the Hall of Fame with an announcement possibly coming Monday night. I will keep my eyes on that tomorrow night. I would be perfectly okay with that. I think they belong in there before some of the other people who've been in there, including the aforementioned Godfather. I think that's one of the ones that really bugs me the most. That, Coco Beware, people like that. Their contributions to World Wrestling Entertainment and wrestling in general. Coco Beware, other than his Memphis wrestling, was really nothing but a low mid-carder. He had maybe a 6-month period where he did Pile Driver, the wrestling album too, and was like a big deal. Otherwise, he was a jobber most of his career, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So if you got people like that in there, a great legendary tag team like the Rock and Roll Express fully belong in there, along with a whole lot of other talents. There have been rumors popping up for a month now about who's going in this year. Diamond Dallas Page, Rick Rude, The Natural Disasters, Beth Phoenix, various different people. It would be really nice for them to start putting the lineup together, because I think people, prior to booking their tickets to go see the event, would like to know who's going to be there. And the Rock and Roll Express would definitely be a worthy addition. eWrestlingNews.com reporting that Kurt Angle is hoping for an opportunity to wrestle AJ Styles, which I fully expected after their classic matches in TNA, but there was a tidbit coming out of his interview that I found to be fascinating and actually something doable for this year's WrestleMania. And I know a lot of people don't feel that he's going to be able to come back and wrestle at this year's card, but I don't buy that, especially when he hints at wanting to face Dean Ambrose. I don't see a storyline for Dean Ambrose heading into WrestleMania right now. He's the Intercontinental Champion. I've said it before. If Angle's going to have a higher profile match, and if there's going to be a title potentially on the line to build some drama in the match, it has to be against a second-tier championship. And Dean Ambrose being Intercontinental Champion makes for an interesting opportunity for that to happen. Kurt Angle, Dean Ambrose would be a phenomenal match. He was very complimentary of Dean Ambrose wrestling style and performance level in the interview. So I anxiously await seeing if that can come to fruition, because I think that would be a match that could really tear the house down. Another big announcement coming out is Chikara announcing their King of Trios tournament. It historically has been held in Philadelphia. For those who don't know what Chikara's King of Trios is, it's essentially a conglomerate of 6-man tag team matches in a tournament fashion. And this show is kind of like their WrestleMania. It's their biggest event of the year. They've announced it'll run from September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. But this year, they're going to be leaving Philadelphia and going to Birmingham, England, which ought to be an exciting event. This is a show that has seen everybody from Cesaro at one point being a part of a trios team that won the tournament, people like Phoenix and Pentagon. So there's been some really good talent that has appeared on these shows. So if you get the opportunity, if you're in the Philadelphia marketplace, you've probably seen the show already if you're a diehard fan. If not, keep an eye on their webpage. They've got some really great talent that they showcase every year at the King of Trios tournament. I want a quick plug on February 6th. Insane Championship Wrestling from England is going to be featuring a big card, and the main event is going to see 2 of the WWE UK talents from the UK tournament, Trent Seven and Wolfgang, and those 2 are going to battle for the ICW Championship. And the same show is going to actually feature some other prominent names. Drew Galloway will be there from TNA, as well as Grotto. So I've been doing as much as I can to try to promote these United Kingdom and promotions outside the United States because they don't get enough respect from the global community, and people don't always realize that the quality of wrestling that's out there outside of the United States. So if you have the opportunity, take a look at the ICW title match coming up at tomorrow night's show. And if you can't, keep your eyes on YouTube. There's plenty of shows. The matches get put up there within days after the event, and they're really entertaining. In other news, Ring of Honor just had their Undisputed Legacy Live event, which I'm not going to go through the whole event, but I will highlight a couple things. One that really frustrates me. I have no problem with Dalton Castle's character. I think they've built him very well in the last several months, but there's a three-way dance between he, Bobby Fish, and Jay Lethal. And the match shows so much promise, but my frustration is this, and I've mentioned this before, Jay Lethal, for over a year, was relatively unbeatable in Ring of Honor. He's one of the talents who had a contract come up in December, who re-signed with the country, showing his loyalty, and now he takes a pinfall victory to Dalton Castle. I understand building a new talent like Castle, but you could have had him go over Bobby Fish, and I think you would have gotten just as much boost without having someone who was unbeatable for such a long period of time lay down for another pin. I don't necessarily like the booking there. Cody Rhodes was in action, defeating Donovan Dijak. The main event of the night saw Adam Cole and Hangman Page team up with the Young Bucks. So you had the Bullet Club go against the Motor City Machine Guns, Leo Rush and Jay White. Good match, decent match, all the high spots, the super kicks, the flips off the rope and dives and all that kind of stuff. Cool match, Adam Cole and the Young Bucks and Hangman Page putting on a show. Motor City Machine Guns, they're just timeless. Those guys are going to go on forever. They're one of my favorite tag teams that never made it to WWE. I would hope for them to get that opportunity at some point, but at their age, I think might be too late for that. But if you get a chance, check out that show. I'm sure they're going to show that on Ring of Honor television in the next couple weeks. That seems to be the trend. So if you do not have a season pass in your TiVo or don't have a pass in your DVR for Ring of Honor, put it in there. You're missing out on some great quality action. Special congratulations in this episode going out to Asuka, being the longest reigning NXT champion of any kind in the time that promotion's been started, or that training center, whatever you want to call it's been started. Being a women's champion this long is pretty impressive, considering how they try to enhance and develop other talent. I think it's only a matter of time until she goes up to the main roster, but you have to wonder who you put her against on the main roster. Does she go against Nia Jax? And if so, how do you elevate Nia Jax to a level where her and Asuka makes for a compelling storyline? And I think maybe the answer to that is at WrestleMania, giving Nia Jax the women's championship. But there is definitely some potential for some killer matches with Asuka, maybe against Charlotte, going against Sasha Banks and people like that on the main roster. So I would look for that to happen shortly after WrestleMania, because her talent is just too great to keep her in the NXT division. New Japan Pro Wrestling had their New Beginning show this weekend. Again, not going to run down the whole card because it's stacked from top to bottom. I will highlight Yoshihashi of the group Chaos, which is like a faction in New Japan, defeating Takahashi Iizuka of Suzuki Gun. For those who don't know, Suzuki Gun is a rogue group of wrestlers who returned to New Japan at Wrestle Kingdom, or the night after Wrestle Kingdom, and has set up this series of matches between different talents. So it was cool to see some of those feuds go off. The IWGP Junior Tag Team Championship was defended in a killer match. Rocky Romero and Beretta of Chaos, another, again, the same group, defeating Suzuki Gun members Taka Michinoku and Tai Chi. For old school WWF fans, you might remember Taka Michinoku from the early light heavyweight division, back when they first brought out that light heavyweight title belt prior to acquiring WCW and switching the labeling to cruiserweight. But it's funny that he's still out there kicking around. You would think he would have made an overture to come back to the States, but he's really made a name for himself over there in Japan and become a huge draw. The card was highlighted by a main event between Kazuchika Okada and Minoru Suzuki being the leader of the Suzuki Gun faction. The match finish sees Okada defeat Minoru Suzuki after 3 Rainmaker clotheslines. I had somebody give me a hard time because I love watching Okada wrestle, and his finisher being a clothesline. People like that wouldn't fly here in the United States. Well, sometimes it's not about what the move is, it's about its delivery. The Rainmaker, for those who don't know what the Rainmaker is, he literally holds your arm across your chest from behind, spins you around and clotheslines you. It's a clothesline. I get it that it's a clothesline, but it's not what it is, it's how he does it. Makes it look devastating. And the way other people sell the move, doing flips out of the clothesline, and he makes it look believable. It's a great move, and to see him beat Minoru Suzuki it was a great match. Other things on the card, the Never Openweight Championship was out there. The IWGP Tag titles were out there. Also great matches. So if you get a chance, I've said this a million times, New Japan Pro Wrestling is some of the best wrestling in the world. If you are not tuning into that every week, then you are missing out. And there's usually 3 to 4 hours of it each week. So look through your television programming and find their shows, because they are worth the watch. I want to do something a little different this episode. I want to give you guys what I'm going to call the look back match. A match from the past, something you've probably never seen, but that I want you to check out if you're a true diehard wrestling fan. This week, I want you to go to YouTube and do a search for Randy Savage versus Jim Pride. This is a match that'll pop up right away. It's from when Randy Savage was still wrestling for his father's promotion, ICW. And it's Randy when he's very, very young. He's a beanpole. He has almost no muscle mass on his body. And for anybody who knows anything about Randy Savage, he was originally a baseball player and transitioned into wrestling as his father was an established star. And this is early in his career, but it's a pretty solid match. You can hear his grumbly voice as he's wrestling in the match, and you could see the difference between his elbow drop from back then to when he was a big star. But very cool match. Do me a favor, if you are one of those people who are contributing to me on YouTube and you're putting out comments, give me some feedback on the Savage versus Jim Pride match when you see it. I'm going to try to throw a match to look back at every episode here on, just so you guys can see some of what I see when I'm going through some of these classic matches. And by the way, on that topic, if you are an avid listener and you have a question that you want answered that I can answer, or something you want me to look into or look up, by all means, please post your questions on the YouTube feed for each episode, or shoot them directly to me through any of the other avenues, because it's something I want to make sure that if there's questions out there, that I can try to find solutions and answers for you guys about this sport that we all love so much. At the same time, as I said this last episode, and thank you to the people who went out and did this. When you're listening to the podcast, by all means, please give us a review, give us a subscribe, try to help our audience grow. The last 3 or 4 episodes have been some of our biggest we've had so far, our biggest viewership, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that from all avenues, whether it's YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, you name it, TuneIn. They all are helpful, and we really appreciate everything that our avid listeners do to try to make our podcast successful. That being said, this week I'm also going to start something I haven't done before, a pro wrestling plug for the episode. And this week's plug, I was very fortunate. I got to have an email conversation with Chikara Wrestling, and I really want you to know about Chikara's Wrestling Factory. If you are a young person out there thinking about a career in professional wrestling, one of the obvious things you have to do is find a way to get yourself trained in the proper way. At 4711 Wingate Street in Philadelphia, Chikara operates their own wrestling school that has produced some of the best talent in the world right now. It's run by, Mike Quackenbush and various other stars, and, they specialize in lucha libre and poroso and British and German styles of European wrestling, mixed martial arts, and even American pro wrestling in their curriculum. And they really strive to create, and it's on their website, they say they strive to create the most well-rounded performers active today, and I think they do a pretty good job. One of their alumni is Cesaro. I mean, you don't have to look any further than that to see top-tier talent coming out of their school. So if that is something that you want to do with your life, if that's something you aspire to do and aspire to be, by all means, check out their website, the Chikara Wrestling School. That's all the time we have for this episode, but check back with us in the next episode. We're going to cover, as always, everything going on in the world of wrestling. We'll keep you posted on all the behind the scenes that we can find out, and keep you going with all the Raw and SmackDown reviews. Special thanks, as always, out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all of our music and sound effects used throughout today's show. Today's podcast is sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games and bring some fun and excitement back to family game night. Go to www.thegamecrafter.com/sketchypeople to pick up your copy today. To the U.S. News and World Report Best Colleges 2017, available at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. And to AlleyRepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade needs. We want to thank you for listening to today's podcast. As always, we encourage you to go to our website at www.frolifeplanning.com to learn more about what Mr. Fro can do for you if you are on the path to higher education. Remember, Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro, and I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today, and we look forward to discussing more current events, rumors, and everything else on our next show. So long, everybody.